This is Alexandra's original Nintendo Game Boy, also known by its model number, which is DMG01. After a bit of rummaging around in the loft, we found this with some games, and as I love messing around with consoles, I thought I'd find out whether it still works, and if so, see what we can do to bring it up to date. The only obvious problem with it is the missing screen cover. So let's power it up and see what we got. It's old, so you have to press start, nothing else will do. Don't use A or B, you've got to press start here. I remember my mum playing this and being able to complete it and get to the space shuttle launch animation. I don't think I ever managed to get to that, but maybe later I can have another try. It's a lovely old thing, it's a classic. Let's see if we can make it nice again. Bam! I've taken it apart completely. This means that I can see what I'm working with and clean up all of the components. Because the Game Boy's pretty old, it's actually quite straightforward to disassemble. The only unusual tool that you need is what's called a tri-wing screwdriver. Nintendo use these on most of their products and they're not difficult to get hold of, but you might not find one lying around in your toolbox. If you have one of these and a posi drive screwdriver, you're pretty much ready to go. You can find links to the tools, replacement parts and other bits and pieces I'm using in this project in the description. Working around this lot from the top left, we have the two halves of the case, of course, the LCD and speaker board, the main board, the cover which protects the cartridge slot, a pot of screws, battery terminals, and the plastic which holds the LCD screen in place, the battery cover, the button membranes, and the buttons themselves. Note that I've stripped everything out of the case because of the next step coming up shortly. I was very surprised at how clean it was inside. I was expecting corrosion or gunge to deal with, but I didn't find anything like that. So all I did was wash all the plastics and button membranes on the left in warm soapy water and gently scrub them with a toothbrush. The light blue D-pad membrane wasn't looking too good, but they're cheap to replace, so I got a new set of membranes. The rest of the originals are looking good, so it's just the D-pad membrane I'm replacing. Next, I wanted to have a go at brightening up the yellowed colour of the case. This is caused by bromine, which used to be added to the plastics as a fire retardant. Over time and exposure to light, the plastic discolours and it ends up looking yellowed. We can fix this using a process called retrobrighting, which involves using UV lights, hydrogen peroxide, and a transparent box to hold all the parts. There are lots of different ways to go about this, but this is what I've settled on. Here I have a strip of UV lights, which are generously sellotaped to the box, and they have their own mains power brick. The Sharpie and battery on the end are so that I can move the lights out of the way and access the parts in the box more easily. In the box are the Game Boy case parts and also some SNES parts, which is a story for another day. They're going to share the peroxide sunbed and hopefully de-yellow also. This is going into the garage where I'll assemble it and leave it alone to do its thing. I have 12 litres of the hydrogen peroxide, or H2O2, and it's 12% strength, the kind you'd use for hair bleaching. It'll ruin your clothes if you accidentally splash them, and if you get it on your skin, it'll irritate it and leave you dry and crusty. I'm going to use marigold gloves and eye goggles too, just to be sure. It's not very nice, and trust me, you don't want it on you. It also won't play well with electronics, hence using so much tape on the UV light strip to make sure it's not going to drop in. I actually left the container with the lights attached for a good few hours as a dry run to make sure they weren't going to move. We'll pour in the H2O2 carefully, making sure not to splash the lights. I filled the container with water I'd measured out previously when I was working out how much H2O2 I would need, and 12 litres was just right to cover most of the SNES and Game Boy bits. There are actually two SNESes, so this setup is going to be hanging around for some time while we do the second batch of bits. You'll notice the bolts bobbing around. These are to weigh down some of the parts and stop them from poking out of the liquid. You may want to move these around periodically so that they get even coverage from the UV light and don't mark the parts. We're going to take some regular kitchen tin foil and wrap it all the way around the box, with the shiny side facing inward. This will help spread the UV light all around the submerged parts so we get even coverage. The lid on top will just keep everything together. After 12 hours, some parts have moved around a bit, so I'll just tweak them into place. I kept checking on them and moving things around over about a 48-hour period. And here's the result. It's looking... well, it's kind of looking the same, actually. It might be a little bit lighter, but it doesn't seem to have made that much difference, really. The thing to do is just to keep going and return it to the bleach pool. But wait, what if while buying some other parts for the project, they sent me an entire new shell? I'd rather use the original, but this case has cutouts and modifications already in place for the other mods we're doing, and has the iconic grey that we're going for. I'm sold, we'll ditch the original case and use this one. To avoid getting in trouble with Nintendo, who are pretty hot on this kind of thing, they obviously had to use the 4 Nintendo Game Boy. I think I can probably fool Alex with the case, but the 4 will have to go. I took some electrical tape and masked off the part that I want to keep, which is the word Nintendo. This should stop it from getting damaged if I make any mistakes. I got some nail polish remover and a cloth, dabbed a little bit of it onto the cloth and gently worked away at the lettering. Normally this stuff is basically acetone, but this one is acetone free, which is unusual. I guess that's why it took a little while to come off. With that removed, here's what it looks like. This will make it easier to do the rest of the mods. It looks brand new and it can't go yellow again as it's made of newer plastics. Plus we have the original as a backup should we need it. It's time to put this back together again. I owe you a decent explanation of this as I was too excited to film the disassembly. I'm working from the front to the back of the device, so the first thing going in is the A and B buttons, followed by the D-pad. Then we have the membrane, which is the start and select buttons, followed by the membrane for the A and B buttons, and our brand new D-pad membrane. Every time you press a button, these things close a little electrical circuit, and the action's registered by the console. I'm going to fit a new screen to this device, and the most amazing looking one I found is called the DMG RIPS LCD V3. Snappy! Let's break that down a bit. DMG is the model number of the Game Boy. IPS is in-plane switching, which is a screen technology for monitors. And I think the R on the front is for replacement, or maybe just rips, because it rips, who knows. LCD is liquid crystal display, which most people have heard of. This being version 3 means that it's gone through some revisions to fix things. And I did read about some issues with the older versions. This kit replaces not just the screen, but the whole LCD board and the speaker, which is great. This might not be for everyone if you're a bit of a purist about these things, but all the processing and graphics guts of the Game Boy are still there. Because we're using this sweet new shell, everything's ready to go and we can just remove the screen protector and drop it onto these 2 posts for alignment. Next, you can carefully connect the delicate ribbon cable from the screen to the display board and close the connector down onto it. The new speaker is a bit smaller than the original, so they give you a sticky mounting to connect it to the front shell under the speaker grill. Next, I'll align the display board, flip it over and check that the buttons all feel right. Then we can get some screws and fix it in place. Because this shell is new and hasn't had screws in it before, it's quite hard going to get the threads cut into the plastic. What we need for this is a better fitting screwdriver than the one I'm using. So I found the correct size in this awesome little set. This set has driver bits for Torx and triangle and other unusual screws. It does have a tri-wing, but it's a little bit dainty for the Game Boy's outer case screws, so you'll see me using a different one later. Once the display board is secured in place, we can move on to the next mod, which involves some soldering. But first, we're going to take one of the finishing touches, which is a new glass display cover. Because the LCD is exposed at the moment, I want to tape this over it to protect it from dust and accidental scratches. The next part is the Retrosix Clean Power V2. This is a replacement for the Game Boy Power Regulator board. The original boards are apparently quite unstable and prone to failure or deterioration of the Game Boy's performance. As we're here doing mods, we'll replace this to keep this old boy going. The regulator board sits in the side of the Game Boy and is connected to the main board by 4 wires. With my soldering iron, I'm going to heat up the pins and add an extra bit of solder to loosen up the connections. If I then work my iron across all 4 pins quickly, the solder will be wet on all 4 of them and I can gently pull the board off. I can then put the replacement board in position and solder the pins in place. There isn't a great deal of room where the board sits, so I'll cut off the pins with some side cutters. This groove along the battery compartment is where it will sit. The other board floating about on 4 wires is the headphone board. This gets screwed to the back of the case, along with the metal plate which covers the cartridge slot. Now we can fit this big ribbon cable between the two boards and line everything up. Note that the main board is fixed in place by the outer case screws, so don't start screwing it down like I did. The power button drops in at the top like this. And if everything looks good, we can finally fit the two halves of the shell together. Now we'll get the silver tri-wing screws I keep banging on about and screw the case back together. Next up is the Clean Juice USB-C battery pack. This is going to stop the Game Boy from being an AA battery muncher and make it a modern, easily rechargeable portable. They claim to give you 24 hours on a single charge, which is pretty amazing. Also really nice is that it just drops in place of the AA batteries. The new shell doesn't have the lower battery terminals, which we would otherwise have to remove for this to fit. We can just slap it in there, pushing it into the top battery terminals first, move this wire out of the way, and it's almost ready to go. We just need to take this new battery door with the cutout and carefully manipulate it so that the battery door fits over the USB-C connector. Once this is on, don't take it off or you'll have to do this fiddly bit again. I'm going to remove any dust from the screen using one of these lint-free cloths you might have if you've ever fitted a phone screen protector. Then it's time for that finishing touch. I'll take the new screen cover and start to remove its many plastic covers. It's good that they protect it so well, I guess. Once this is all unwrapped, I'll carefully drop it into place and our Game Boy is now ready to go. I'm very happy with how this thing looks, which is more or less brand new. You could say that I cheated because the only original thing you can actually see is the buttons, and that is definitely fair comment. The first thing to do, of course, is fire up the legendary classic and everyone's favourite Game Boy title, Jack Nicklaus Golf. Look at his possessed demonic face there, no wonder he's so good at golf. Straight away, you can see that the screen is just absolutely something else. It's now backlit, has lots of contrast to play with, and we have the option of switching between different colours with a push of the contrast wheel. I can't see us using that much, but an interesting thing to have anyway. The new speaker sounds just fine, despite the offensive music here. There are amplifier mods you can do to make it louder, but I wasn't too fussed about doing that. Let's choose a one-player stroke play here from Jack's options, sounds like my kind of thing. And we will heed that weather warning, but we will heed it in the black and white kind of colour. And it's Jack's complete favourite look, the 8th at Pebble Beach. Whatever, let's go. Amazing fade-in effects there. And let's bat this thing. Straight in the water. That's enough goal for now. Back to Tetris, and if we compare the original screen versus the new one, you can see the knockout difference here. I'm very pleased with the results. As for the USB-C charging, it lights up so that you know what it's up to, and that red glow coming through the plastic goes out when it's fully charged, so you have an idea of what's going on. The lineup of games is pretty small, but I'm particularly looking forward to playing this one as I remember it being pretty unusual for a Mario game. Maybe after I've completed Tetris and golf. Thanks very much for watching, do let me know what you think. My inspiration to do this came almost entirely from a YouTube channel called Odd Tinkering, where a guy who really knows what he's doing takes apart old things and makes them nice again. Do check it out. See you next time, bye bye!